Okay.
Okay, so I've started the recording, and the reason why I want to start the recording is that starting bit where you talk about what it is that you do. Normally we wouldn't do that because people have got the sort of intro when we tag it on LinkedIn about who you are and what you do and where you do. But I actually think it's a really good idea for you to explain the mechanics of what it is you actually do at Taxation. And the reason why that is because people will have the experience, I think, they're accountants and dealing with the ATO. And there's obviously, you and I know there's a difference to what you do. There's added bits and pieces.
There's a huge difference. So we actually come from a legal perspective. So we don't operate as a law firm, but my background is I've been a commercial lawyer for nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of different parts of what we do at Taxation. So your accountants will deal with the compliance side of things, and I wouldn't know how to lodge a BAS to save myself. Whereas we deal with effectively the non-compliance side. The other big part of what we're doing for people at the moment is helping them get back any interest and penalties that they've paid, either recently or in the past. And that's done through, it's a more legal process in a way, because we're looking at the legal practice notes that the ATO have to comply with. And then we prepare submissions that are usually around 10 or 12 pages that go through all of the requirements that the ATO need to see to accept those applications. If
you've got the rule book, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And we understand that sort of legal speak that they want to see. You only get one bite at the cherry, so to speak, with these remission applications to get your interest and penalties back. And if one paragraph is just sort of put on the portal quickly by an admin assistant, say, and you get knocked back, the next step is a objection within the Supreme Court. So it makes it much, much harder, and that's why it's so important to get it right the first time. I think the other big difference too between us and accountants is we deal with a debt section at the ATO. So we have a different area, different phone numbers, and we've built amazing relationships with the directors and also the officers within that debt section. And they know that our job is, yes, to help the client, but it also helps them because it gets the debt repaid. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, but it's a very different area that we deal with.
Yeah, sure. So with those, the relationships that you've got within that department, I mean, it sounds like what you've got is the rule book of how to play, more so than anything else. And you talked about you work in that non-compliance space. What defines a business or a business owner's ATO position as non-compliant?
So that's actually really important at the moment. And I think a huge thing that we're going to see sort of now for even the next 12 months, if you are a day late in lodging or payment, the ATO is very black and white, very bureaucratic. Like you said, there's rules. You either fit within the rules, it's either inside the bounds or it's out of bounds. And if you're a day late or you have any outstanding payments, the ATO consider you non-compliant. And then it just is the level of where that non-compliance sits. If it's a day late, look, there's not really going to be an issue. Once that starts building up or the debt level builds up, then that's where it's really, I think, going to become an issue. And I think one of the biggest things businesses are going to be facing moving forward is up until the 14th of September, the ATO weren't knocking. So they were leaving everybody alone because of COVID. And when you're in a really tricky situation, I've done it personally, I'm sure you have, we put our head in the sand. If someone's not hassling us and it's difficult and we don't know the answers, then we don't do anything about it.
Sure.
And I think, and rightly so, there's been so much for businesses to have to deal with at the moment that a lot of people have come to the conclusion, well, the ATO is not chasing, so I'm not going to worry about it. Everything changed on the 14th of September, and there were specific directions to the ATO to start that process up again, to start ringing. And what I think the concern is, back to your original non-compliance question, is there's going to be a whole heap of businesses that haven't done anything. And when we get to mid next year, the ATO will come knocking. It's no doubt about will they, it's when will they. And businesses are going to say, well, you didn't hassle me, you didn't send me a letter, so why does it matter? Whereas you'll end up in a non-compliance box, so to speak.
And look, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind with that. I mean, the ATO is going to say, well, it doesn't matter that we didn't come knocking. You're
Yeah,
still going to be non-compliant. That's pretty obvious. I think that so many businesses, because of that cessation of activity and collections calls and all those sorts of things, there's so much more to worry about than just keeping up to
100%.
date with that sort of stuff. So through no fault of people, and there's enough things on people's plates, that those ATO balances are definitely going to be going up. You've also got
100%.
the ability to defer so many different kinds of payments at the moment, that this is going to be potentially a big problem sitting alongside other smaller problems, or potentially quite large
Yeah.
problems as well, with deferred loan repayments and rental and all the other things that need to be caught up. So what's if a business owner is looking at that and saying to themselves, well, I know at some point towards the middle of next year, the ATO is going to start knocking hard. It's not just going to be a
Yeah.
call. They're going to be acting hard and moving along. What should we be thinking about as business owners now to have,
Yeah.
I suppose, the best possible outcome that we can have?
So there's a lot of simple things, even if cash flow is really bad, that we can do now to keep you compliant. So one of the things the ATO look at is what they call engagement. So if a business defaults, there are new laws that came in at the start of this year that the ATO can actually register you with credit agencies, which will affect your credit rating. To stop that, there's a way to stop that is by engagement. So by talking to the ATO, by either engaging us to talk on your behalf, or people may even want to do it themselves. But if there's that contact with the ATO, as you mentioned, to proactively ask for deferrals.
Yep.
One of the things that we're managing for people at the moment is to keep their lodgements up to date, but to make applications to defer that payment. So by proactively requesting a deferral, you stay compliant because the money's actually not due yet. Lots of people a lot of accountants did automatic deferrals like blanket deferrals for almost their whole client base.
Yeah.
They've all finished on the 14th of September. So if your holds or your deferrals finished on the 14th of September, everything is technically due and payable now. So you need to actually engage again and make those applications now for the deferral of those payments. Otherwise, you're again non-compliant. Another thing we're helping people with is very short-term, smaller payment plans.
Yep.
So I've got a few businesses that are saying to me, look, things are starting to slowly pick up. I can't afford a huge amount per month, but I can dedicate a small amount for the next 6 months. So we're working with people and going, okay, what's a 6-month or a 12-month plan to keep them in that compliance space? And it might be a short-term payment plan for now with a small amount, or it might be a deferral. The other thing that we're doing, like I mentioned earlier, which is extremely positive, is looking at what the interest and penalty component of the debt is. So if you've been a day late ever, you will have interest accumulated at around 8.55% compounded daily. Now, in your world, you'll be able to work that out what a comparison rate is, but I think it's around 9.5.
Yep.
Which is where the interest compounds plus penalties. So we're going back and having a look at what that figure is for people. I've done some as far back as 20 years.
Yeah, right.
We often do them sort of 6, 7, 8 years where they've had lumpy compliance. So they've been late, then they've been compliant, then they've been late, then they've been compliant. We can look at that with the correct grounds. We can make an application to get all that written off. Now, what that can do is it can either reduce your tax debt, or if you don't have that much of a debt, it can put you in a positive cash flow position. So if your current debt, I'm just going to use simple numbers, if your current debt is 20,000 and you've got 80,000, which isn't uncommon, of interest and penalties that have accumulated over 6 or 8 years, we can get, if there's the grounds there and the right application, all of that written off.
Yep.
Which what that then does is gets rid of your 20 and gives you 60 credit.
Yes.
So you can either leave that there, so you've got banked up credit with the ATO, or you can withdraw that cash. So it's effectively another way of getting a cash boost for businesses at the moment.
Yeah, which I think very few people would be aware of. I think even that engagement piece, preventing the impact on the credit rating, that's something that I didn't know.
Yeah.
But I think how to use, I think that engagement piece to actually change. I mean, we've got an $80,000 penalty piece to a 20,000 credit piece. I just think people would think that wouldn't occur to them, that that's even possible.
No. And I hear almost every second day, why didn't I know about you? How did no one tell me that you exist or what you can do?
Well, there's not many people around that do this. There's a few, but not many.
Yeah, and in such a specialised, this is all we do.
Yeah.
So we live and breathe the relationships with the ATO. We live and breathe the practice notes, the rules around what's allowed and what's not allowed. And as a business owner myself, and understanding the insolvency in the corporate and commercial world, I think it's a unique combination.
What do you think is going to happen? Because you mentioned insolvency just there. What do you think is going to happen? So we get the extension on the trading while insolvent laws has been put forward now to the 31st of December.
1st of December.
What do you think is likely to happen from an ATO approach after that date? Because obviously once that finishes up, there's a whole range of different things and I suppose pathways forward that are going to be triggered. But specifically, how do you think the ATO might behave?
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at the GFC, it's a little bit different to the current situation, but I suppose that's the closest guide we've got. My feeling is there will be a softer approach, so they will start the engagement, start asking where it is. But I can't see that lasting for more than about 6 months.
Yep.
And then I personally believe legal action will start again because it just can't not. It is in too much of a deficit.
Yep.
And I really believe that within 6 months, what happened with the GFC is GFC was a great excuse for about 6 months.
Yep.
And after that, the ATO and other creditors said, okay, we get it, but now we want to be paid.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that will start happening. I think also the proposed new insolvency laws for businesses that even only just sort of came out in the media yesterday, that if you have $1 million or less in credit, I'm not sure if you've seen the commentary around that. There's going to be some different restructuring rules about how individuals might be able to appoint a restructuring specialist. Nothing's been finalised yet, rather than go directly to a liquidator. So it looks like the government are trying to introduce a simpler process for smaller businesses with smaller debts to effectively trade out of it without needing to go into administration process, based upon what I've been reading. However, the ATO is still going to be, I think, in nearly 60, 70, 80% of the time, your largest creditor.
Yep.
And you're still going to have the consent of that creditor to trade out of it. If we can reduce that debt, or if we can get you in. The other thing we do, like I said, is manage the debt by helping you get into a compliant payment plan that you can afford. So not one that's been dictated by the ATO, but one that we put up knowing that you can actually sustain it.
Yep.
And these negotiations are going to happen. So if you're reducing your debt now, or you're looking at planning on how to manage that debt, if the business, and there's going to be businesses that unfortunately get into that position, are going to have to do these sorts of negotiations, you're already in a better position than if you've had no engagement or you haven't lowered your debt. Another example is we helped a business that had $400,000 of tax debt.
Yep.
280 of that was penalties and interest. So 400 is this insane amount to try and repay back. 120. Doable.
Looking at that stuff for some people too, I think the psychological difference between looking at a $400,000 debt versus a $120,000 debt, that's poles apart. I mean, that the weight off the shoulders.
They sleep again.
Yeah.
Which is what we do. The other thing too then, with that 120, we then put that in a 3-year payment plan.
Yeah.
So we're able to get not 6 months, but long-term payment plans
Yeah.
to then manage the rest of it, which is just as important as the reduction.
Well, I think it's like anything, right? So, I mean, as business owners, we're very good at the things that we do and the services and products that we provide to our customers and our clients. And then we use other specialists to help us in the different areas. And like you said, about
100%.
you don't know anything about lodging the BAS, but I mean, dealing with the arrears is a totally different thing. That's your area of specialty. And
100%.
I really think there's a place for tapping into the experts in different areas. We automatically do it with law. We do it with accountancy. We obviously do it with finance brokering, which is the reason why I exist, and so many different other fields. I think you just don't know what you don't know if you're coming in as a generalist. And I think where you're talking about getting those penalties and interest payments dropped in the way that you have, and payment plans over extending a long period of time, I think that just demonstrates the value of that. But the other thing that I'm really hearing too is that, like a lot of other stuff, early intervention and action is just the most critical thing that you can do.
100%. Even if you don't have the cash flow to pay it now, now's the time to start engaging and planning and working out different strategies. It's not one size fits all. Every single one of my clients, we go through what's going to be best for them now, in 3 months, potentially 6 months, or some of them it's just, what do we need to do now to get them sleeping, keep their head above water. And we really are a add-on specialist to your accountant. We offer something very different to what they do, which is vital, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this, and I'm sure we'll come back and we'll talk again, Olga, because
absolutely,
the ATO and tax and arrears and that sort of stuff is obviously something that's relevant for some segment of business owners pretty much all the time. But I think with everything that's happened and the changes in the economy, it's a really big issue. And I appreciate you sharing your expertise and your information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, at the moment, it's constantly changing. So there's, like I said, there's new proposed laws that came out yesterday. It's we need to sort of keep up, and there's a whole heap of different things businesses, on top of everything else they're dealing with. If they do plan now and tap into the right people, I think they've got a much better chance in 6 or 12 months' time.
Yeah, good advice. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you.